hours. Okay. Okay. Uh, we were online. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to SouJava channel, which is Emilly Jiang, talking about MicroProfile Config. Emilly, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel, for inviting me to do the talk on the MicroProfile Config. I am Emilly Jiang. I work for IBM. I'm a senior technical staff member. I am a Liberty microservice architect, and also I'm an advocate. So I go to a lot of conferences and talk to a lot attendees and customers regarding Liberty and MicroProfile. So I mainly work on MicroProfile and Liberty, both Open Liberty, both open source projects. I'm also Java champion. If you want, follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Emilly FH Jiang. So ask me questions or tweet anything, or I'll be tweet a lot of MicroProfile related and microservices related information, etc. Why I'm here to talk about config is because personally I lead the MicroProfile config, which is the first specification in MicroProfile and is widely used. Is used by most of the other MicroProfile specifications. So it's hopefully in the next 50 minutes, I will give you a quick overview on MicroProfile config, and also is including some future, roadmap, and with some demos as well. Okay, let's have a quick look. Why do we need this MicroProfile spec? Basically, we want to achieve the scenario whether you write your microservice or develop your microservice, and you could configure everywhere without repackaging your microservice and redeploying your microservice. As we know, like if you have read the 12-factor app, probably you will know the third factor is externalized configuration, your configuration. So how to achieve that factor? Basically, MicroProfile config is the answer for that requirement. Give you a quick history about config. Actually, config JSR was proposed in October 2016 by Oracle, and then shortly afterwards, the config MicroProfile config started in October 2016. Actually, at that time, I started this proposal MicroProfile config is because I was thinking if Oracle is doing config JSR, I can start a MicroProfile config trying to reflect what config JSR's proposal, and then we could release earlier, because normally for config JSR it takes like a couple years for the first version. For microservices world, things moving very fast. We cannot wait for 2 years for this config, to be finalized. So which is why. And then actually soon after the MicroProfile config started, config JSR proposal was withdrawn. And then, as you can see, in the June 2017, MicroProfile config was released. This is the first release. during that time, like in these 8 months, is I didn't spend most of the time on these APIs and etc. Spend considerable time to figure out how to release the artifacts under Eclipse Foundation. The other thing that I want to emphasize is MicroProfile Config is under Eclipse Foundation. So we had to work out the process and how to release the MicroProfile Config, how to like run past the IP and etc. So is only within these 8 months we managed to get MicroProfile Config released, and then because of the success, Eclipse Foundation proposed Config JSR in September 2017 with Mark Struberg and me as the co-spec lead, and it was accepted. The proposal was accepted, and the number config JSR 380 was assigned. And earlier this year, because the Java EE moved to Eclipse Foundation, renamed to be Jakarta EE, and only this year is in March this year it was finalized. All the Java EE specs, if they want do any update, their namespace has to be updated from JavaX to Jakarta. So it's because of this, and the JSRs under JCP in Oracle has to go through kind of a namespace change. So this is one of the main reasons, like we thought, okay, if we standardize in the JCP, and then if we want to do further development, we have to, rename from JavaX to Jakarta, so which is not a good thing. So maybe it's better we withdraw from JCP, and then we can continue MicroProfile Config, or we can propose a new specification under Jakarta. So anyway, now it's only one config so far. It's called MicroProfile Config. So in this talk, I will talk about everything in the MicroProfile Config. So for the configuration, the concept is very straightforward. So basically you have 4 layers. The first one is kind of you specify your properties in one of the configure sources. So the configure source can be anywhere, can be in a file, can be in a database, and can be in the like config map in Kubernetes, for example. And then is a MicroProfile config will go through all these kind of config source and create a config object. And with this config object, and you can retrieve any particular config properties. And in that config property, it could be in any type. That type, we call it converters. So you need to have a converter for the type you want to retrieve. So it's eventually you will get a type, typed config value. So this is a kind of structure. You have a config property, you have converter, you have an aggregate view of the config property, which is config, and then you specify the config properties in config sources. In the MicroProfile config, AutoBox, we provide 3 default config sources. The first config source is the file called microprofile-config.properties on your class path. And mainly is for the wall, I'll be in the webinf classes metainf microprofile config.property. For the jar file, I'll be in your metainf / microprofile-config.properties. And then the second one is the environment variables. and also system properties. These config sources, they are layered. Why I say they are layered is because we associate a priority for each config source. We call this priority the ordinal. So in the MicroProfile-config.property, it has ordinal 100. And then the environment variable is 300, system property is 400. So if you specify the same config property in multiple config sources, the value from the higher ordinal will overwrite all the other config sources. In this example here is if you in the MicroProfile-config.properties, you specify the port 8080, and then in your environment variables in 9081, and then in the system properties 9080. And when you inject this, when you retrieve this property port in your application, and you will get 9080 because 9080 has a higher priority, a higher ordinal. So that's why this value is used. This is a config API. So you can see this config interface. You have a get value, retrieve each individual property. You pass in the property name, you pass in the property type. The other one, for this method, if it used, so this config must exist. If it doesn't exist, you will get error. The other thing is if the config property may not exist, you could get optional value. In this case, you get optional, and with optional, you can assign a default, and etc. Optional can be no, can be exist or non-existing, and also you can get the iterable property names, and also you can ask for what kind of config sources opt in for this to contribute towards this config object. So then this one is config property. So this interface is purely used for the CDI injection. So you can inject, if you have a CDI enabled, you can inject config properties into your microservices. And you can see which name, which config property, and also if it's config property is optional, you can assign a default value. And with this no value, you can also say, okay, if this doesn't exist, I want a no. So you will be able to assign no. So this no value has not been released. Hopefully, will be released next year. So plan for config 1.4 release. So how to use this config APIs is first of all, you need to specify the property in the config source. You can specify in the default config source in the environment variable, system property, or MicroProfile-config properties, or other config sources like zookeeper, like your database, and etc. Pre-configure this config source, and also the config source specify the ranking. So this is especially important for the customer config. So custom config source, if you want to override some properties, you need to think. You need to give this config source suitable ranking, suitable ordinal. And then with that, you can, in your application, you can either use a programmatic lookup. Basically, you can do a config provider.config to get hold of config. That's a config object. And you can do a config.get value, like you can say name equals myprop, and with a string. So it's you can get the you can get the non-name equals the means with this line you will see you will get the myprop configure properties value. The other way is to use the CDI injection. So it's if you have a CDI enabled, all the configure property can be injected into your microservices. You can do a @inject, @configure property, and you specify which property you want to inject. In this case, I will want to inject my.string.property, and then the variable myprop v will be assigned with a value of my.string.property. Later on, I will do a demo, so you will understand how to use this either programmatic lookup or CDI injection model. So it's, if you use the CDI, as you know, CDI is pretty static. So if you inject a value, this value will, once it be injected, it will be fixed. So this is kind of, if you have a property, its value will not change. So you are free to use like @inject, configure property, and give it a direct inject into a type. However, if you want to retrieve the up-to-date value, you know some value might change, and you have better inject a proxy. In this case, you can inject the provider. So you do a @inject, configure property, and then give that property name, and you wrap the object with a provider, which is a proxy. So it's actually the provider itself doesn't change, but inside the provider changes. Earlier, I mentioned about the configure property. If you do the config, retrieve the config, and then later on you do a get value, and that means that property is mandatory. If it doesn't exist, if that property doesn't exist, you will get an error. No such element exists exception. What if a configure property is optional, and you can still get hold of this configure property either using programmatic lookup or using injection. So using the programmatic lookup, you directly still say configure provider.get config, and then you do a config.get optional value, and this is the property name. This is the property type. And if it doesn't exist, you can give it a default instead my default, doing this way. The other way is to use the injection model. So it's you use @inject configure property. The name of the property is my static props, and if it doesn't exist, you will get a blah. If it exists, you will get that value. Similarly, you could do a you could if you don't give it specified default here, you can use inject, directly inject into an optional, and then later on you can do a or else can assign default value for it. This is a new feature we added. So basically, you do a @inject configure property, and this is property name. Sorry, I got a typo here. So here is not a configure property. So ignore this configure property. You have a name equals my nullable, and then you directly specify default value equals configure property dot no value. In this case, if this my dot nullable doesn't exist, you will got a null assigned to the nullable. So the other thing is array support. So what if my configure property consists of kind of a list of things? So in this example, like my pets, I have dog, cat, and also I have a dog, cat. So it's one thing to bear in mind for our array support, our delimiter is the comma. So we kind of split this string into a list, and based on using this comma as a delimiter. However, how can we skip this comma? In this case, like a dog, a cat, I don't want to be one element, two element. I want to be this element. Basically, this element directly contain comma itself. So I can use backslash to escape this comma. So in this case, you can assign this one into an array. So you can do a config.get value and then pass a string here, pass an array here. So you will get a string or arrays. And in the inject, you can you can assign to the array, and then also you can directly give the type a list or give a type a set. So it has a further type support, list or set. So it's to put everything in one picture here. As I mentioned earlier, so it's AutoBox. You have three default config sources. So MicroProfile, metainfo MicroProfile dash config.properties, environment variable, and system properties. And also in your code itself, you know, you do a default value in your code, in your like a microservice code, we call it an optional default value. So that has a lowest priority. So if I specify a property called conference, and in my metainfo config MicroProfile dash config.properties with JAX, and then later on I create a customer config source. So this is my JSON file, customer config source. It has config underscore ordinal with 150 is with a value SouJava. And then in my code, in my microservice, I directly inject a conference and with the provider and string. And then because this one, customer config source has an ordinal 150, and this one has 100 ordinal. So this one will win. So basically, in the code, in my code, when I running my microservice, the value of the conference will be SouJava instead of JAX. So in your code, so basically is again to recap, you specify your config property in config sources and in your microservice, and you directly look it up using programmatic way, or you use CDI directly inject the property value into your code. Let's have a look at the config source API. So config source, as you can see, it has a string config underscore ordinal. So when you create a customer config source, make sure you in that customer config source, you also put a config underscore ordinal inside the file to override the default, which is 100, with a meaningful ordinal. So there's a few methods is get properties, get property names, also get an ordinal is a default using Java 8 default, and also get value and get a name. So it's the thing is the main thing with this config source is config ordinal to specify, identify this priority or the config source. The other main thing is the get value. Actually, at the moment we are talking about whether the get properties is kind of required method or not. Because as you can see, it's like in some huge database and etc. If we want to retrieve get properties, that could be time consuming or waste a lot of time to retrieve everything. Anyway, that's kind of still in the future discussion. So I mentioned earlier about customer config source. In a customer config source, basically, is you want to specify the property in a kind of in your own config source. So you need to first create a config source contain this property, and then you have to create implementation of the config source API. Basically, I mentioned earlier, you have to, implement all the method and pass the config source you created. If it's a JSON file, you have to use the parser direct to properly pass it. If it's a resource file, you have to read in the resource file. And the third one is use as is basically plug in this config source with the implementation with the runtime. You have to basically make sure your config source opt in for constructing this config object. So the way to opt in for the config object constitution, we use the service loader pattern. So service loader pattern, if you are not familiar with, I highly recommend you read something about the service loader because it's quite widely used. So basically, service loader patterns are not complicated. So you create the metainf and then services, and then with the API you implementing. So in these circumstances, you implementing the org eclipse microprofile config.spi.config source. So you directly, so this is your implementation class, fully qualified implementation class there. In this way, the runtime, the MicroProfile config implementation will kind of read this one, automatically load the customer config source. So all the properties and etc. contain this customer config source will be opt-in, will be available for this microservice you're trying to contributing to. So the next one is kind of the other layer. So once you get a config, and then you can retrieve each individual property in that config. And then with a converter, you can convert to a particular type. So a converter interface is very simple. It only have one method called convert. So convert a string to a value. As you know, like all the properties when the present, represent on disk anywhere would be a string. So this is a kind of converter, directly convert a string to a type. There's some built-in converters. So it's in the built-in converters, you have basically this is directly available to you auto box. You have a Boolean, all the primitive ones, and also the boxed ones. Boolean, int, long, float, double, byte, character, and etc. And then you can specify your own converters. So your own converter, again, we use a service loader pattern to directly opt in. So all the kind of built-in converter has a priority. One, you can overwrite this built-in converter with a higher priority as well. You could create your own, for example, Boolean. Maybe it's in different language. You have a different way to say yes, and you could create a Boolean converter directly overwrite this built-in converter. by using the priority. This we also you know, earlier I talked about how can you convert list things and with a comma separated string into a array or into a list or into a set. Is because we have provide array converter. So this is also is out-of-box. We have an array converter available to you so that you don't need to do anything. If your config property contain comma, you can directly convert into a array. However, if you say no, I don't really convert to array, that's fine. You don't need to convert to array. So in this example here, if you really want to read the whole string, you just say string instead of a string array. So it's, in this example, in earlier example, because I use backslash to skip the comma. So my path will be dog, cat, and dog, cat. So I can, yeah. The other thing is the implicit converter. Actually, is to help you. To help you to directly convert a string to a different type. We don't really want you to have to write converters for each type you want converted to. Then we came up with the solution of providing implicit converter. Why is it called implicit converter? Basically, the type you are trying to convert to, if it contains the following four method. The first one is the of string. The second one is the value of. The third one is the path char sequence. The fourth one is a constructor with a string. So basically, in your type, for example, if you want to convert a string to be a SouJava, for example, in a SouJava type, if you have a constructor directly take a string and also construct into a SouJava, and in this case, you don't need to provide a converter at all. This class itself, the type itself is a converter. It's called an implicit converter. So earlier I said you could create a customer converters, and so basically what you only need to do is create an implementation of converter SPI or create the implementation of converter SPI, and then you use the service loader pattern to directly load the implementation of the converter. Again, the service loader pattern, you can see service and this converter, and you put the converter implementation here. And in this case, MicroProfile Config runtime will automatically load this class. So in your code, if you want to do a get value, a string, the my property, and the customer email converter, it automatically call this class to config to convert a string into that email type. Earlier I made a typo. If I say if this converter is called customer email converter, basically is the convert a string into an email, and in your code you can say config.getValue and my email and comma email.class, and then you can get an email type. Okay, this is kind of up to half an hour. Maybe let me quickly give you a quick demo before I talk about config in the cloud. So I have my I have created a microservice. Basically, it's running on OpenLiberty. At the moment, it's running with on the development mode. So if you really want to know how to create a microservice, MicroProfile microservice, so the other thing I want to show is start or MicroProfile.io. So basically, is you can see here you choose. This is create Maven project with the MicroProfile specification example to help you start. Writing your microservices by using MicroProfile specifications. You can choose that version, and then the server will list all the runtime support that version, and then you can see download. You will get a file. So in this case, like I choose OpenLiberty, you will get your microservice running on OpenLiberty. If you open it up, you can see there's two microservice generated for you. In this case, it's because I choose the REST client, so I demonstrate the service A calling into service B. If you CD to service A, you do a Maven clean install, and you can build it, and then there's a README to directly tell you what to do. So in my project, I use this kind of starter MicroProfile starter. I create my Maven project, and also I updated to use the OpenLiberty dev mode. Basically, the dev mode. So the dev mode is I directly started my microservice and will watch for any changes if there's away. At the moment, I'm waiting for the 3.1 be hopefully this week, and then I will the file. So with that dev mode, once you download the project CD to size, you can do this one. And then I use the VS Code and directly import my microservice into VS Code. Let me show you what I have done here. So basically, I only have a JAX application. So this is the application. This is just the same hello world. Let me see. I have a few on display. Okay, so it's so this is the kind of this is my like a config the config hello world example. At the moment, I just say hello SouJava. Let's see. Let's go to that endpoint to see whether I can get it to work. So I have this one previously see. So let me demo to you like if I say close SouJava on Monday, I save it, and then I go back here. See, it automatically kind of displayed. So this is the kind of we call it a development mode. So basically, as you code along, you can see the changes straight away. If you want to run any test, and you can press enter. You can press enter to run any test. In my case, it's run the test. So it's also you could debug it as well. Okay, let's see. So at the moment, I mentioned earlier in the meta info folder, you can specify any config properties in this file. In here, if as you see, I have this room and user and attendees. Let's first inject I want to visit this room. I can also add a conference. I can say SouJava, right? I will say SouJava live here, conference. And here, let me directly inject. I want to look up that one. I can say config property. I just say name equals conference. And then I say string conference. Instead of here, let me directly say conference. Let's go back. See, you can see automatically inject SouJava live command. So this is the kind of the inject way to, look up this conference, and you could do the like a programmatic way to do the lookup. You can also say string for in the conf equals. I can do a config provider dot get config dot get value, and I can say conference. The type will be a string class. So here, instead of the conference, here I do a conf. As you see, you will get exactly the same thing. So you got exactly same thing. So it's a kind of CDI way or programmatic way. You get exactly the same result back. So this is the programmatic way, and this is CDI way, injection way. So earlier I talked a lot about the array converter. So in these circumstances, basically I create attendees, for example, here is a comma separated. I want split them up. I want to display what's this the attendees separately, like John, Tom, Dan, and also I will say okay, another Tom. So basically, is if I do a set, I will expect like a John, Tom, and Dan. Let's have a look how can we do it to just get a unique attendees. So this is John A, Tom B, Tom N. Here is Tom N again. Okay. Let's go to here. I can directly inject config property name equals attendees and string. You can do do this way, and then I can directly do a set string attendees. And then attendees are let's see, go back here. See, it's a kind of automatically kind of remove the duplicate. You got Tom and Dan and John A. So this is kind of array support and also the set and list support. And I also talked about customer config sources. The customer config sources actually is in this example here. So have a look. Let's go to a different terminal. So in here, so I have a customer config source. We do a customer config source. So it's as you can see, this is I have a config ordinal, and so this is specifies the ordinal, and also has this is the other property is the email, and also secret, and also the age. So you can easily for that one. So in this configure source, we can opt in. So basically, it's in the first thing we create implementation of configure source. So customer configure source. In this configure source, so here is the where the file lives. The file lives in the conference code 1 customer configure source, and then I implement each configure source and implement a get property. So basically, use the JSON parser to directly pass the each value and etc. So you will read the file in and directly pass them. And so this is the second step. The third step is use service loader pattern. Basically, is directly specify many services and org Eclipse MicroProfile. This is fully qualified. This is SPI, the SPI name, SPI.configure source. So this implementation directly corresponds to this file. With this, in your code, you can directly inject the email. You can directly inject the age, so is that configure source can contribute properties to you. So there's for the injection is exactly same as this. So let's go back to the slides again to see the how MicroProfile can be used in the cloud. This so for the how can you use the config in the cloud? So basically earlier I mentioned when you do the config and you really want to achieve the objective written once config everywhere. So it's it's when you want to create cloud native microservices and you will deploy your microservice in the cloud. Is one of the mainstream of the cloud scenario is everything run, most things architecture based on Kubernetes. In the Kubernetes, you will know there's a config map, and very common scenario is a config map directly mapped to environment variable. So so in this case, like all the config map properties mapped to environment variable that can override the config properties in your application. However, like I have the question, how can I specify host.name in the environment variable as an environment variable? You may not, if you haven't done this before, you may not say, okay, I can just directly say host.name equals and specify a value. However, according to the standard environment variable, is if you want to make the environment variable work in any OS, the variable name only allow alphanumeric or underscore. In this case, dot is illegal character. So it's really pity if you cannot overwrite a host.name. And with this, actually, we came up with mapping rules in MicroProfile. We map each non-alphanumeric with underscore when it comes to lookup in the environment variable. So, for example, in this slide here, in this property name is my.demo.myRestClient /mp-rest/URL. We can directly map to all the dots slash or hyphen into underscore. So you can see my_demo_my_rest_client _mp_rest_URL. In this case, actually, is in your code, you can directly inject your property, and you only know your property name is my.demo.myrest_client /mprest/URL, and you inject, easily here, and in the MicroProfile config implementation, and when it's trying to look up the value in the environment variable, it will directly look up the property with the name of this. So if you specify a value like this one in your environment variable, and this localhost 8080/demo will be injected into my URL. So I will spend probably a couple minutes to talk about the upcoming features. This is all pending change. So it's so we might put some more changes in the next year's release. So it's the first thing, like in the one of the change is we introduced another layer. It's called config. We are going to introduce another layer called config accessor. So basically, is the config provider.get config. You get config, big config object, and then in that config object, we can plug in another layer. And currently, you directly do a config.get value, right? And you could go through another layer process, is the config access builder, to massage or to kind of have extra processing of these properties. So what are the extra processing of these properties? We could say, okay, we really want to use alternative converters, or we want to specify a different default with a typed default, or with a different string default, or we could evaluate variables. Basically, you have if you your config property, refer to another config property. At the moment, you directly get a string, and then with this config access builder, you could have the variable replacement. So this is the config. Once you get a config access builder, you can do a build and to get a config accessor. In the config accessor, you can do a get value, optional value, default value, and a property name, and etc. Earlier, I mentioned a little bit about evaluate variable. So this is give you a better example. So if I have a property, the my company.some URL directly referred to my server.host. At the moment, if you do a get value of the my company.some.url, you will directly get dollar bracket my server.host closing bracket /sum/path. It's not useful if you get this value. You really want to have my server.host replaced with a real value. So with this proposed change, you can do a get holder config, and then you can say access my company.some URL, evaluate variable true.build. And in this case, you will get the when you trying to look up my company.some.url, you will get a value http colon //localhost colon 8081. Basically, this value replaced this holder and /sum/path. So this is kind of good note secondary is URL. Basically, this will be a final URL. So also is there's kind of in the beginning I mentioned a little bit about the future of the configuration. The MicroProfile config is continuing to progress, to have more features, have more changes, and have more releases for the next year. And at the moment in the Jakarta EE mailing list, we also talk about to direct adopt configuration. We want maybe it's kind of there's a Jakarta config to be in the Jakarta EE, so that is some other Jakarta EE specifications can use this configuration. As I say earlier, configuration is very popular, very useful. And as you know, there's a Jakarta NoSQL, and the would like to use configuration. But at the moment, we're discussing whether the Jakarta specification can directly use MicroProfile config, but it seems from Eclipse Foundation, this is not ideal. Maybe we have to create a new config under Eclipse Foundation and Jakarta EE. Maybe the port what's in the MicroProfile config into Jakarta EE. So nothing is concrete as yet, but one thing is concrete is we continue to make more progress in the MicroProfile config. So if you stay on the MicroProfile config, you can use all the up-to-date features we put in, and we're trying to do a release early next year. With that, I think pretty much done. Are there any questions? Or this is a kind of references. Config, if you have any issues, raise issues on this GitHub and watch the releases, and you can get the specifications and Java doc under this /releases and to see the Java doc. And this is the blog I wrote a couple of years ago about MicroProfile config. Okay, with that, I think I'm done. Are there any questions?
I have two. I can use JSON how configuration.
Yes, you can use the JSON configuration. Autobox, you cannot use the JSON configuration. if you have a JSON configure source, you have to create the customer configure source directly, implement implement configure source API. So and you can put the JSON there. So let me show you what I mean. So in here, in the previous example here, I showed you earlier. So it's there's a JSON file to contain the configure properties, and you need to create the implementation of the configure source directly pass this JSON. And in the path, you use the JSON parser directly pass it. But AutoBox, we don't have a JSON converter, or as such, we don't have a JSON configure source.
Okay.
Yeah.
All the question is about that 382. We not will be continued.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
I see. About the 382. We not will be continued.
3.2.
Yes. JSE.
You mean JSE 3.2? What do you mean 3.2? MicroProfile 3.2?
Yes.
So it's next year, like February next year, we plan to do a MicroProfile. Oh, you mean the GSR 382? Yeah, GSR 382 has been withdrawn. So basically, I put a request to withdraw this GSR because is once we go to the GSR 382 is we use a JavaX, but once we want to make any changes, we need to change the we need to update the package from JavaX to Jakarta. So we have to go through the kind of package renaming process. I think it's better if we want to be in the Jakarta EE umbrella. It's better to directly go to the Jakarta EE instead of have to go to GSR 382 and then port back to the Jakarta EE.
Okay. No having notifications. You mean something final?
Which panels?
Yes. You mean oh my God.
You want to put the question? Okay. You want to put a question in the chat?
No.
What panels?
Yes. You you want to say something final?
Let me see. Oh, you mean something final? No. I had maybe it's a kind of no. There's no final. Maybe it's a kind of misunderstanding. So basically, all I said is the configure GSR 380 has been withdrawn. We're not going to do anything there. And there's a possibility we might do something under Jakarta EE, but it's still under discussion. One thing that for sure is we are going to do more updates under MicroProfile. So MicroProfile config is the way forward at the moment until we decided to do a Jakarta config.
Okay. Mm, so I will end the live. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for lecture of today. I liked it much. I liked it much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Daniel, for inviting me. Yeah, if you have any questions, yeah, feel free to get in touch. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.